2 inches. That's what started it. 2 inches of treated lumber, rising just barely above some invisible HOA guideline, measured by a woman with a tape measure and a vendetta. If you've ever had a neighbor who treats rules like religion, not to protect peace but to punish, you know exactly what this is. Hit like, drop your HOA nightmare in the comments, and subscribe if you've ever thought about replacing your fence with a fortress. Because this story, it ends with 20 feet of beautiful, legal revenge. It began like every boring homeowner project. I moved into Maple Ridge in May. Quiet street, modest houses, friendly dogs, forgettable landscaping. I wasn't there to socialize, just needed a yard big enough for my two rescues, Max and Luna, and far enough from the city that I could pretend the world didn't exist after 7 p.m. The house needed work, but the bones were good. One of the first things on the list, rebuild the rear fence. The old one was a joke, splintered posts, sagging rails, one whole panel missing, like someone gave up halfway through fixing it. So I pulled permits, bought the lumber, hired a local crew, kept it simple. Vertical boards, natural finish, standard height, 6 feet, which I double-checked was the HOA maximum, or so I thought. The crew finished in 2 days. On the third day, I stepped outside with my coffee and nearly dropped the mug. She was standing there, measuring tape in hand, clipboard under one arm, aviator sunglasses, a rigid bob haircut that hadn't moved since the Reagan administration. She didn't introduce herself, didn't say good morning, just looked at me over the rim of her sunglasses and said, "It's too tall." I blinked. "Excuse me." "The fence," she said. "It exceeds height regulation. I'm seeing 6 feet and 2 inches, maybe more depending on slope." I looked. The ground was uneven, slightly elevated at one end. Maybe that's what she meant. "I checked the bylaws," I said. "It's 6 feet." She held up a laminated sheet. 6 feet from lowest adjacent grade. Your back corner exceeds that by 2.3 inches. I'll be filing a violation with the HOA. I stared at her. "You're kidding." "I don't kid," she said. "I serve." That was my first meeting with Elaine Marsh. Later I found out she wasn't just a concerned neighbor. She was the head of the Architectural Compliance Committee, which in Maple Ridge meant she could request inspections, issue fines, and initiate enforcement measures without a full board vote. HOA power concentrated in one person, a suburban tyrant. The letter came 3 days later. "Dear Mr. Miller, you are in violation of Section 3, subsection C of the Maple Ridge Covenant regarding fence height. Your structure exceeds approved limits and must be modified to comply within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $50 and potential HOA legal action." I read it twice, then a third time. 2 inches. I sent an email asking for clarification, attaching the installation report and the city-approved permit. No answer. I called the HOA office. Voicemail, I left a message. Nothing. So I did what any decent homeowner does. I walked the neighborhood, measured fences, compared. And guess what? 5 other fences on my street were taller than mine, some by much more. One had lattice extensions, another had a decorative archway that stood nearly 7 feet high. Not a single one had a violation notice. I asked around. "Elaine doesn't like people changing things," one neighbor told me. Another, "She only enforces rules when it bothers her." Someone even whispered, "She fined a woman for a hummingbird feeder, said it attracted pests." I emailed again. Still no answer. On day 13, I received another notice, this one with a $50 fine. Max and Luna barked as I crumpled it and tossed it across the kitchen. They didn't understand fines. They just wanted their yard. I tried to modify the fence, lowered one panel, tried to adjust the grade with packed soil. Didn't matter. Elaine came back the next morning, this time with a camera, took photos, measured again, left without a word. I got another letter that afternoon. Adjustment attempts noted but insufficient. Non-compliance continues. I was being hunted, over 2 inches of wood. So I did what I hadn't wanted to do. I fought back. I started by digging through the HOA's founding documents. Most people never read them, but I did. Buried in Section 5. Decorative landscape structures are exempt from fence height restrictions, provided they do not serve a primary boundary purpose and are aesthetically justified. Decorative. Aesthetically justified. It was vague, open-ended, and perfectly usable. I drafted a proposal for a modular vertical privacy installation, essentially a row of 20-foot-tall wooden panels attached to vertical beams, spaced with planter boxes and decorative slats. Not a fence, not attached to my existing one, just tall, beautiful, and entirely within code. I submitted the documents to the HOA. This time I CC'd every board member, and I attached a rendering. 3 days later, I got a response from someone other than Elaine. Jake, the board treasurer. Interesting concept. No obvious violations. We'll review at next board meeting. Elaine responded 1 hour later. This structure clearly circumvents fence policy. It should not be approved. But Jake replied again. If it's decorative and within code, we don't have grounds to deny it. That was the crack, and I pushed through it. Construction began 2 weeks later. The crew returned, confused but intrigued. Each panel stood 20 feet tall, stained deep cedar, spaced evenly along the back property line. Between them, vertical gardens, decorative light fixtures, even wind chimes. It was bold, dramatic, and completely legal. Elaine came by during installation, didn't speak, just stared, then turned and walked away. I smiled. 2 inches too tall? Fine. Here's 20 feet. The wall rose like a stage backdrop. It wasn't a fence. It didn't touch the property line. It stood just inside, detached, decorative, and utterly impossible to ignore. Each panel stood proud, anchored in footers approved by city code, adorned with vertical planters, uplights, and wind chimes tuned to E major. By the 3rd day of construction, it blocked Elaine's entire second-floor view. Mission accomplished. But the show was just beginning. Elaine's reaction came in silence. At first, no confrontation, no shouting. Just that stare from her upstairs window. Cold, unreadable, calculating. The kind of expression people wear before lawsuits. Then the first letter arrived. Dear Mr. Miller, while technically not a fence, your recent installation represents a clear circumvention of architectural harmony standards. The structure disrupts visual continuity, casts unnatural shadows, and may create airflow anomalies. The board is reviewing your design for code misalignment. Airflow anomalies? I laughed so hard I dropped the envelope. That night, the HOA group chat, resurrected after years of inactivity, lit up. Screenshots circulated. My renderings. Elaine's letter. Photos of the wall taken from down the street, posted with captions like, Dude built a fortress lol. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just read the bylaws. 2 inches? Meet 20 feet. I stayed quiet. Watched it unfold. Waited. Then the backlash started. Not against me. Against her. Someone anonymously shared a PDF dump of past violation letters sent by Elaine. Over 30 in the last 2 years alone. Each one neatly formatted, always signed in service of the HOA, with language that ranged from condescending to threatening. A few highlights. Wind chimes create unpredictable noise profiles. Your garage door paint has faded into an unacceptable taupe. Weeds seen from the sidewalk may suggest neglect. People were stunned. Neighbors started sharing stories. She fined me for painting my mailbox without approval. She told my teenage son his car was ruining the tone of the neighborhood. She filed a complaint about my daughter's chalk art. And suddenly, everything changed. Jake from the board emailed me directly. You shook something loose. People are speaking up. We're reviewing Elaine's authority structure. May need a formal vote. He asked if I'd be willing to speak at the next HOA meeting. I hesitated. I didn't want the spotlight, just peace. But I said yes. That Saturday, I watered the planters along the wall. The tomatoes had already sprouted tiny buds. I adjusted one of the wind chimes. It had spun awkwardly after the windstorm the night before. Then I heard the voice. You think this is funny? Elaine. She was standing at the edge of her driveway, arms folded. No clipboard, no sunglasses. Just fury barely contained behind a neutral tone. I said calmly, it's well within code. You're mocking the rules. I'm following them more precisely than you are. She stepped closer. You made this personal. You fined me over 2 inches. That was personal. Her voice dropped. This won't last. I nodded toward the wall. Looks pretty solid to me. She left without another word. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a bland room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs that somehow made everyone uncomfortable even before anything happened. It was packed. More people than I'd ever seen in one place since moving in. The agenda was short. Fence policy clarifications, decorative structure, guidelines, community feedback session. Elaine tried to speak first. We need to address what's happening to the visual consistency of this neighborhood. But Amanda, a board member I hadn't met yet, cut in. First, we'll hear from Mr. Miller. I stepped to the mic. I had no script, just a manila folder with 3 documents. My original permit, the HOA's decorative exemption clause, photos of other non-compliant fences in the neighborhood. I kept it simple. 2 inches. That's what triggered this. I complied with every rule, filed every form, and still I was fined, threatened, targeted, not for breaking rules, but for not asking permission from one person. I let the silence land. This wall, it's not revenge, it's protection from overreach, from hypocrisy, from the belief that power equals correctness. Then I stepped back. Elaine didn't speak again. Amanda introduced a motion to require all future violation notices be board reviewed before issuance. Passed, 5-0. Jake followed with another. To suspend the architectural compliance chair's unilateral powers pending review. Passed. 5-0. Elaine stood, walked out, didn't even wait for adjournment. The room buzzed after she left. People shook hands, laughed. Some approached me, thanked me. One man said, "You gave us our neighborhood back." Another, "I thought I was the only one she singled out." Even Amanda pulled me aside. "You didn't just build a wall," she said. "You tore one down." I left quietly. The stars were out. The wind was calm. The wall stood silent, steady, legal. The next morning, someone left a gift on my porch. A bag of soil, a packet of sunflower seeds, and a note. "Plant these along the wall. Make it even taller." A neighbor I did, and they grew. The sunflowers came in faster than I expected. By mid-July, they towered over the planters, golden, defiant, swaying gently above the 20-foot panels like flags planted in reclaimed territory. The neighborhood kids nicknamed them the Watchers. Some even made up stories about how the flowers glowed at night or whispered when the wind passed through them. I didn't correct them. Let them believe. Because in a way they were right. The wall had changed things. And not just for me. The week after the HOA meeting, the board published new guidelines. Clean, clear, fair. All complaints required board review. Any past notices issued unilaterally by Elaine were void unless reapproved. Decorative structures were to be judged by form and function, not personal taste. No more surprise fines. No more threats signed on behalf of. Transparency, finally. The PDF hit the HOA portal at noon. By 1 p.m., someone had spray-chalked "New Era" on the community sidewalk near the clubhouse. I had nothing to do with it, but I smiled when I saw it. Elaine stayed quiet. No letters, no sidewalk confrontations, no more measuring tape patrols. Her porch light stayed off at night. Her hedges, once trimmed into knife-like precision, grew unruly. Her HOA email account went inactive. Rumor had it she'd tried to dispute her suspension through an outside firm, but the board shut it down fast. Amanda called me 2 weeks later. "She's stepping down." I didn't ask for details, didn't need them. She'd lost. Not because someone yelled louder, but because no one was scared anymore. It was strange at first, not being watched. No notes on my porch, no sideways glares from across the driveway, no anonymous complaints about lawn height or structural overpresence. The silence felt suspicious, then freeing, then normal. I hadn't realized how much space she took up in my mind until she was gone from it. I went days, then weeks, without thinking of her. I caught myself humming while adjusting the irrigation. Even Max and Luna seemed more relaxed. Less barking, more naps in the sun. The backyard stopped being a battlefield, became a home again. Other people followed suit. The neighbor behind me painted their fence a soft navy blue, clearly outside the old guidelines. No one said a word. The couple across the street installed a freestanding pergola near the curb, another decorative structure that just happened to double as a shady hangout spot. A row of planter boxes popped up on Maple Drive, painted in rainbow pastels. Before, any one of those things would have triggered Elaine's wrath. Now, they were just part of the scenery. Real neighborhoods aren't catalogs. They breathe. And finally, ours did too. One Sunday afternoon, as I adjusted the solar lanterns hanging along the wall, I heard a voice from the other side. Small, nervous. "Hey, Mr. Miller?" I peeked over. A kid, maybe 11, stood there in a baseball cap too big for his head, holding a small notepad. "Hi," I said. "Everything okay?" He nodded quickly. "I'm doing a summer project for school about, you know, local stuff. Can I ask you questions about your wall?" I smiled. "Sure. What do you want to know?" He flipped pages. "Did you build it because you were mad?" I paused, then knelt to his level. "No," I said. "I built it because someone told me I didn't have the right to feel comfortable in my own space, and I didn't think that was okay." He scribbled that down, then looked up. "My mom says you're the reason she stopped being scared of getting letters." I blinked. "Well," I said, "tell your mom I'm glad." He nodded again, then ran off. Later that night, Amanda sent me a photo. It showed the same kid presenting his report in a folding chair at the HOA's summer potluck. The board had hosted it for the first time in 4 years. A whiteboard behind him had the title, "How One Fence Became a Wall for Everyone." I laughed, louder than I had in weeks. Then the strangest thing happened. A knock. Not on my front door, on the gate. I opened it slowly. Elaine stood there, alone. No clipboard, no sunglasses, just a tote bag and a faded cardigan. Her eyes didn't meet mine at first. "I came to apologize," she said quietly. I said nothing. She took a breath. "I let my need for control override the point of this place. I thought I was preserving something, but I was just afraid of change. And when people don't push back, it feels like they agree, even when they don't." Still, I said nothing. "I'm sorry," she added, and her voice cracked slightly. "For the fence, for the fines, for everything." A long moment passed. Then I opened the gate wider, gestured toward the wall. "You want to see what you built?" She blinked, then nodded. We walked the line together. She ran her fingers along the sunflower stalks, paused at the tomato planter, let the wind chimes ring gently above her head. "I hated it," she said. "At first." "I know. It's beautiful." I nodded, then turned and walked back to the gate. She followed. Before she left, she said one last thing. "You didn't just win. You made it better." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The wall said everything. Elaine didn't come back after that. Not in any meaningful way. She stayed in the neighborhood, sure. Her house still stood 2 lots behind mine. Same stone planters. Same bay window with the floral curtains. But she stopped walking the street. Stopped peering over fences. Stopped sending letters that turned small annoyances into capital offenses. Some called it retirement. Others called it exile. Me, I called it peace. With Elaine gone from the board, the atmosphere in Maple Ridge shifted fully. No more anonymous notices. No more veiled threats signed compliance team. The new board, led by Amanda and backed by Jake in a surprisingly organized book club coalition, introduced a community input system. Residents could now propose changes to HOA policy directly, vote on them quarterly, and even submit photos for inspiration rather than violation. They called it the Open Fence Initiative. I wasn't involved, didn't need to be. My work was already built into the neighborhood skyline. By late summer, the wall had grown into something more. The sunflowers reached record height, fed by compost donations from 2 elderly neighbors who'd never spoken to me before. Planters bloomed with peppers, basil, and lavender. Someone anonymously left a small ceramic plaque at the base of one panel that read, Privacy is power, and sometimes beauty, too. Even Max and Luna started spending more time by the base of the wall, lounging in the shadows it cast across the grass, like two guards who finally trusted the border. I'd installed it to shield. It had become a canvas. That September, the local newsletter, now run by Amanda, featured a story titled, "How a Fence That Wasn't a Fence Changed Everything." They interviewed half a dozen neighbors, most of whom talked about fear. Not overt fear, but the quiet kind. Fear of painting too loud, of planting too wide, of living even an inch outside the box, and how one wall reminded them the rules weren't laws, just expectations. And sometimes the expectation needs to be broken. Elaine wasn't quoted, but the final paragraph read, "A community isn't defined by uniform fences. It's defined by what happens when someone finally asks, 'What if we did it differently?'" I didn't know Amanda had written it until she left a copy on my porch. Tucked inside, a handwritten note. "Hope you're okay with being a local legend now." I laughed, then folded the note and taped it to the inside of my shed, right next to the original violation letter, a timeline. In October, I hosted a backyard barbecue. Not a big one, just a few people. The Garcias from next door, the older couple with the pastel planters, Amanda, Jake, and the kid with the notebook. His name was Connor, I'd finally learned. We grilled. We sat under string lights I hung from the wall. We told stories. Not about fences or fines or HOA drama. Just life. The kind of life we'd been too cautious to live out loud before. At one point, Connor asked if I'd ever take the wall down. "Not a chance," I said. "Even if the HOA let you?" "It's not about the HOA anymore," I replied. "It's about the reminder." He tilted his head. "Of what?" I looked around at everyone, laughing, eating, talking like they'd lived beside each other for years instead of behind hedges in tension. "Of what happens," I said, "when you stop letting one person set the rules for everyone." Elaine's house went up for sale in November. No open house signs, no fanfare. Just a quiet online listing, minimal photos, and a bland caption. "Charming home in a peaceful community." The irony nearly made me choke. Within days, the listing disappeared. Sold. Rumor said she moved to a smaller town north of here, one with no HOA. Fitting, in a way. She spent years enforcing rules she couldn't live without, only to realize the cost of living by them was more than she could afford. The night she left, I watched from my driveway. No words, no crowd, just a car packed to the brim, a final glance in the mirror, and gone. Max barked once, then laid back down. I sipped my coffee, let the silence stretch. The next morning, I found a new note, folded, taped to the bottom rail of the wall. No envelope. I didn't say it well when I tried, but thank you. You helped me see myself clearly. That's not always a gift, but it's always necessary. It wasn't signed. Didn't have to be. I tucked it into the same shed wall, pinned it beneath a ceramic plaque. The wall had collected stories now, not just lumber and nails. Stories, proof, memory, change. And maybe that's what made it more than just a structure. Not revenge, not rebellion, but something in between. Something that says, "I saw what you tried to do, and I built something better." Not out of spite, out of strength. So yeah, she said my fence was too tall. I gave her a 20-foot masterpiece. But the real win was that everyone else saw it too, and realized they could build something for themselves. Something loud, something bold, something beautiful, something you don't ask permission for. The wall stood through winter. The sunflowers faded, of course. The blooms shriveled, the stalks dried, and by January they were just golden ghosts rustling in the breeze. I let them be, left the planters untouched, the same way you leave holiday lights up a little longer than you should. Not because you forgot, but because you remember. Maple Ridge entered the new year changed. Not radically, just lighter. Less tense. A couple on Birch Lane painted their front door teal. No complaint. The Sings added a freestanding glass greenhouse in their side yard. No interference. Someone even started a neighborhood tool library with an unlocked shed and a sign that read, "Borrow, return, trust. Before, that would have lasted a week. Now, 3 months in, not a single tool had gone missing. People didn't need stricter rules. They needed room to breathe. In March, the board hosted its first open planning forum. Amanda asked me to speak. I declined, not because I wasn't grateful, but because I didn't want to be the guy with the wall forever. It had done its job. Now it belonged to the community as much as it did to me. One afternoon, I watched Connor, the notebook kid, lead a group of classmates along the fence line. He pointed at the beams, the wind chimes, the reclaimed planter wood. One girl asked if it was for security. Another thought it was art. He smiled and said, "It's both, but mostly it's about not backing down." I didn't step outside, didn't interrupt, just stood by the window and felt something I hadn't felt since this all began: pride. That spring, the wall came back to life. New soil, fresh seeds, sunflowers again, yes, but also string beans, climbing jasmine, ivy that would take years to fill in. But that was the point. Some things grow slow, but they root deep, and the deeper they root, the harder they are to tear down. Max and Luna, older now, still napped in the same sunspots. Neighbors still waved, and occasionally, just occasionally, someone new would ask, "So what's the story with the wall?" And I'd smile, pause, then say, "It's long." And if they stayed, I'd tell it, because stories like that deserve to be told. Over fences, across porches, into notebooks, and down generations. So if you're watching this, if you're staring at your own Elaine, your own wall, your own letter telling you to shrink, comply, fall in line, let this be your reminder. You don't owe silence to people who weaponize structure. You don't owe obedience to rules that serve no one. What you owe is the truth, in whatever shape it takes, even if it's 20 feet tall. Thanks for watching. If this story hit home, hit like. Share your HOA war stories in the comments, and subscribe, because sometimes the best way to fight back is to build something no one can ignore.